then I thought, well, um, should I try writing another one? Not really. The amount of effort that I had to put in, I was back starting at another residency. I was back at the beginning again after finishing one residency. And so I didn't really have a lot of time. But one of the benefits of being in the Harvard system was that you get to talk to people in the other schools. And the reason was is that I played basketball um, uh, 2 or 3 times a week. And we had the medical side had a team, the law school had a team, and the business school had a team. And I was playing at the business school, and I actually asked a couple of the business guys. Um, they were instructors, they weren't students, they were instructors. And I said, I mentioned this about this, and they said, well, why don't you do what we do here? We teach in the case method. So pick out a couple of successful books that you would like to emulate and study them, study the process, study how they came about. And so that's what I did. And I picked 2 books. One was Jaws, and the other was Love Story. And both books had come out and were successful projects. And they were from writers who were unknown prior to that, like I was. And so I studied both of those projects, and it turned out that they were very similar in how they came about. And so I emulated them. I did it exactly the same way that both of those did. And lo and behold, it worked. That just came out of my imagination completely. And but what didn't come out of my imagination was the fact that business interests have been taking over medicine ever since I was in medical school, to a terrible degree, as evidenced by what's happening in the news today, in terms of the insurance companies and providers, et cetera. It's a huge business, and people have been sort of lost. And so what I wanted to do in Coma was to come up with a business concept that was probably going to happen, because one of the things that medical research does, it doesn't really think about the implications if they're successful. And one of the implications of all the effort that was being put into in terms of transplant efficacy, and not thinking about the supply side. So you're going to create this enormous demand, and there's always going to be somebody who's going to figure out a way to fulfill it, especially if they can make a buck. And so the idea of an organization realizing the value of transplant organs. So that's how it came about. It was just to find an issue that I could to use to really demonstrate this idea of how business was intruding into medicine. I did it way back when, my second book in Coma, very specifically because I wanted to. One of the issues, I tried to load Coma up with just about a bunch of important issues. And back then, one of the important issues were women in medicine. To me, it made so much more sense as it is today. Now, we have more than half the medical students are women now. When I was in medical school, out of a class of, I think we were somewhere around 120 or something, I think we had 6 women. And yet it seemed to me that any analogies of who would make a better doctor you just say to yourself, when I was sick, did I want to be with my mother or my father? And hands down, it was your mother. So, it was another issue, interesting issue, and it made me do some research and to find out why it was harder at that time for someone to go through the training. I guess I tried to separate the two dramatically, but in my own hospital, we had to renumber operating room and get rid of number 8 because that's where everything happened bad in Coma. And I didn't expect that, of course. And I felt particularly excited, however, about Bellevue coming out as well. So much has happened at Bellevue Hospital, and it is arguably the oldest public hospital in the United States. There's another hospital that they think might have been a little bit earlier or whatever in their earlier renditions. But it's probably our oldest hospital. It's a public hospital. It's trying to take care of the masses. It's just the opposite of trying to make a buck, so to speak. It's to take care of people. But it also has a colorful history, as medicine has. And one of the things that I've always sort of wanted to write about was the fact that the history of medicine, which the medical profession wants to take credit for, and it should, but it wasn't this even upward slant of learning, and knowing more, and et cetera. It was kind of a jigsaw, especially when you think that for so long, the medical profession felt that it was appropriate to bleed people. This was their major treatment, is to bleed people, which we now know that that's the absolute opposite. And but anyway, even those events in medicine that are truly wonderful advances, like the introduction of anesthesia, everybody didn't jump on it right away. If you can imagine, how could somebody think that no, it was wrong, it was against God's will? Pain was something that was important for people to experience. Please, it's just beyond comprehension. So I wanted to bring up a lot of these issues in the history of medicine, and I realized that by having an individual with a genealogy, family members who were back during, in the course of many years, either contributing or being against. And so Bellevue was the way I realized to do it. But interestingly enough, what stimulated me more than anything else about writing Bellevue was all my visits to the New York City Medical Examiner's Office doing these 14 books with Jack and Lori. Every time I went there, just across the street from where the Medical Examiner's Office is this deserted, haunted house that used to be the Bellevue Psychiatric Institute or hospital. It's a 600-bed hospital that's essentially empty. It's being used a little bit in one corner, just a little tiny bit of it, but the rest of it's empty, completely empty, and it's been empty for almost 40 years. How to explain that? Nobody can figure it out, no way. It's when you look at all these hospitals, all these new hospitals, everybody's vying for space. They're actually kicking the New York City Medical Examiner's Office out of that building because it's owned by New York University, and they want it back. So they're having to move the medical examiner's office. So anyway, that's just to give you an idea. But here's this 600 bed hospital that's empty. So that was a great stimulus for me to write Bellevue.
Is you
That's what a thriller is. I mean, you have to put your character into peril. Otherwise, it's not a thriller. Uh, and that's the part, the main part of being a thriller is being in peril and you, the reader, somehow having to deal with it. Either foreknowledge, as I said earlier, or you learning exactly at the same time that the main character is. But there's always this threat, there has to be. Otherwise, it's not a thriller. That is what a thriller is. You want to get your pulse going and whatnot. And you're worried. Well, I took a lot of pictures of the building, and I didn't try to actually go in it because I found a whole bunch of photographs of the interior, and that was adequate. But yeah, I mean, uh, I was, in fact, every time I go to New York and I go to that area, I am intrigued by the sense that this building somehow has withstood the fact that it is in such an important area and the space is needed and yet, of course, in Bellevue, it's suggesting that it's the Bellevue spirits who occupy that building. They don't want it to be knocked down. I've never used the paranormal in my books. And to me, it was kind of a cop out. In other words, you can have a story and all sorts of strange things happen. And when you finally end up explaining it, it's because, well, it's paranormal. And that's the explanation. To me, that's kind of a cop out in a way. I think that putting together, because I spend a lot of time thinking about and the storylines to deal with some major biotechnical issue of some sort that has to really make sense and scientifically. But with this book, I I had that sense of freedom, and and you don't really know, are they real, or is Mitt's mind conjuring these up? And you don't know. You can't. And then you get to the end and the last sentence. I think it's really takes a little wind out of you.